was 1972, a golden era for Hollywood, but a period of deep transition for the world of martial arts. At the center of this transition was the Paramount Pictures backlot, a sprawling city of sound stages and equipment trucks where the lines between cinematic fantasy and cold reality often blurred. On one particular Tuesday afternoon, Clint Eastwood, the man who defined the tough guy archetype of the 20th century, was walking toward a high-stakes production meeting. Eastwood was never alone. He was always shadowed by a man who looked less like a human and more like a force of nature. This was Marcus Dutton, standing 6 feet 5 inches tall and weighing a solid 350 pounds. Marcus was the embodiment of raw American military power. He was a former Green Beret, a veteran of 2 tours in the deadliest jungles of Vietnam, and a man whose entire existence was built on the foundation of physical dominance. To Marcus, the world was divided into predators and prey, and he had never met a man who could challenge his throne. He viewed the martial arts craze sweeping through Hollywood with a mixture of boredom and contempt, believing that movie fighting was nothing more than a choreographed dance for people who had never felt the spray of real gravel or the sting of a real blade. However, as they rounded the corner toward the hollow darkness of Soundstage 12, Marcus Dutton was about to encounter a biological anomaly that would rewrite every rule he lived by in less time than it takes to blink an eye. Standing near a set of lighting rigs was Bruce Lee. He was lean, weighing barely 135 pounds, and appeared almost ethereal next to the massive granite-like frame of the Green Beret. Bruce was there for a meeting of his own, dressed in his signature black training gear, looking every bit the philosopher king he had become. Clint Eastwood, who possessed a rare and deep-seated respect for Bruce's revolutionary Jeet Kune Do philosophy, stopped to exchange a few words of mutual admiration. But Marcus Dutton didn't see a revolutionary. He saw a 130-pound actor who had been elevated to godlike status by camera tricks, clever editing, and wire work. The numbers associated with Bruce Lee's speed were already a legend in the industries of him being so fast that cameramen had to shoot at 32 frames per second just to see his hands butt to a combat veteran like Marcus. These were just fish stories meant to sell tickets. Fueled by the arrogance of his own massive size and his decorated military past, Marcus decided he was the one to expose the fraud. The air in the Paramount lot suddenly grew heavy, vibrating with that specific localized pressure that preceded a life-altering confrontation. Marcus stepped forward, his massive shadow completely engulfing the smaller man, and uttered the challenge that would echo through Hollywood history. "I've seen real men die in the mud, Leah. Your movie magic doesn't mean a damn thing when 350 pounds of muscle decides it's time for you to go down." The crew members nearby froze. The sound of a heavy equipment crate being dragged across concrete stopped abruptly. Everyone knew that a confrontation between a 350-pound Green Beret and a movie star could only end in a lawsuit or an ambulance. But Bruce Lee didn't flinch. He didn't even shift his stance. Instead, he looked at Marcus with a terrifyingly calm curiosity, as if he were a scientist observing a particularly interesting specimen of outdated machinery. This is where the true numbers game began, a game that Marcus had already lost before the first punch was even thrown. Bruce didn't see a giant. He saw a collection of anatomical levers, points of inertia, and predictable mass. Science tells us that the more mass an object has, the more telegraphing it requires to move it. Body must twitch, the shoulder must dip, and the breath must catch before a heavy strike can be launched. To Bruce's hypertuned nervous system, Marcus was moving in slow motion. Bruce's entire life was dedicated to non-telegraphic movement strikes that originated from the center of gravity without any warning. As the two men moved into the echoing, cavernous silence of Soundstage 12 to settle the dispute away from the prying eyes of studio executives, the atmosphere was haunting. Marcus was a mountain of muscle, but Bruce was a lightning strike waiting to happen. The Green Beret lunged, throwing a jab that carried enough force to shatter a human skull, but Bruce simply moved 3 inches to the left. It wasn't a retreat. It was a surgical redirection of space that left Marcus punching the empty air, his own massive momentum suddenly becoming a weight that threatened to pull him off his feet. The controversy surrounding what followed has been debated in the secret inner circles of martial arts for 50 years. Some claim the fight was a draw, others claim Bruce used mystical powers. But the reality was far more clinical and far more brutal. As Marcus overextended, he felt a pressure on his wrist that was as light as a feather, but as absolute as gravity. Bruce didn't meet the giant's strength with his own. He flowed around it, adhering to his be water philosophy in its most lethal application. Marcus, growing frustrated and fueled by a surge of combat adrenaline, tried to revert to his military wrestling training. He reached down and grabbed Bruce's ankle with a hand that had literally crushed throats in the jungles of Vietnam. Marcus was certain that once he brought the 135-pound actor to the ground, his size would win the day. But Bruce Lee didn't resist the grab. Instead, he used Marcus' grip as a fulcrum and anchor in space. In one fluid, almost invisible motion, Bruce dropped his center of gravity and swung his free leg in a sharp vertical arc. The heel of his shoe connected with Marcus' jaw with the precision of a master clockmaker. It wasn't a movie kick. There was no cinematic whoosh sound. It was a short radius, explosive discharge of kinetic energy that utilized the entire torque of Bruce's hips and legs. The sound of the heel meeting the jaw echoed through Soundstage 12 like the snap of a dry branch in a winter forest, and the 350-pound titan of a man collapsed as if his entire nervous system had been instantly unplugged from the source. This brings us to the ultimate intersection of fact versus fiction. The skeptics will always ask, how can a man a third of the size of his opponent dismantle a world-class killer in 8 seconds? To understand the answer, you have to look at the psychological wreckage that was left behind. Marcus Dutton didn't wake up with the desire for revenge. He woke up with a shattered soul. He sat on that cold concrete floor for nearly 10 minutes, staring at his massive calloused hands, unable to fathom how a man he considered a dancer had treated him with the casual efficiency of a butcher. Clint Eastwood later described the incident not as a brawl, but as an enlightenment. Bruce Lee hadn't used anger. He hadn't even used effort. He had simply allowed Marcus to commit to his own assumptions of size, and then he had removed the target. This encounter proves that the hidden legacy of Bruce Lee wasn't about the box office records. It was about the biological boundaries of human potential that he had successfully crossed. He was performing 5,000 repetitions of a single lead punch every single day, not for the fame, but to achieve a state of unconscious competence where the body reacts before the brain can even formulate a thought. For Marcus, the Green Beret, the realization was catastrophic. All his years of lethal military training were based on a linear, two-dimensional understanding of force, while Bruce Lee was operating in a multi-dimensional world of rhythm, speed, and absolute redirection. The numbers game of this encounter continues to baffle modern biomechanical researchers and sports scientists alike. How does a 135-pound human frame generate enough force to shut down the brain of a 350-pound professional fighter? The secret lies in the kinetic chain. In a standard punch, a fighter uses their arm and shoulder. In a Bruce Lee strike, the force is generated from the friction of the feet against the floor, amplified by the rotation of the knees, accelerated by the pivot of the hips, and then delivered through a snapping motion of the wrist that creates a shockwave effect rather than a simple push. Bruce wasn't hitting Marcus with a hand, he was hitting him with the earth itself. The energy transfer was so efficient that 100% of the force went directly into Marcus' jaw, causing a massive disruption in his vestibular system. This is the part of the story that the competitors and the skeptics often overlook. It's not about how much weight you can move in a gym, it's about how much of that power you can actually deliver to a target in a single millisecond. Marcus Dutton resigned from his position as Clint Eastwood's head of security just 2 weeks after that afternoon at stage 12. He didn't quit because of the pain. He quit because he could no longer live with the illusion that he was the most dangerous man in the room. He spent the remaining years of his life in relative obscurity, reportedly obsessed with Eastern philosophy, trying to find the source of the mental stillness that Bruce had displayed during those 8 seconds of violence. The controversy of the Paramount Lot incident is often suppressed because it challenges our comforting beliefs about size and strength. We want to believe that the bigger man always wins because it makes the world feel predictable. But Bruce Lee was a walking contradiction to that predictability. He was a scientist of the human body who had decoded the very language of combat. When we look at the modern landscape of fighting today with 260-pound UFC heavyweights and elite special forces operators, we still ask the same question: could Bruce have survived today? The answer isn't found in his reach or his weight class, it's found in the eyes of Clint Eastwood that day. Eastwood, a man who had made a career out of playing the toughest characters in the history of cinema, saw something that day that he never forgot. He saw that Bruce Lee was other. He had reached a point of evolution where the traditional rules of engagement, size, reach, and mass no longer applied to him. He was a man who could see the end of a fight before the first breath was taken, a man who had mastered the rhythm of the universe to the point where he could simply be wherever his opponent was not. As the decades passed, the story of Marcus Dutton and Soundstage 12 became a whispered legend, a ghost story told among stunt coordinators and old-school martial artists who worked the lots in the 70s. It serves as the ultimate bridge between the myth of the dragon and the reality of the man. It wasn't about Bruce Lee being a superhero, it was about him being the most disciplined human being to ever walk the planet. He proved that if you are fast enough, precise enough, and fundamentally fearless enough, the numbers on a scale are nothing more than a suggestion. Bruce Lee didn't just defeat a Green Beret that day, he defeated the very concept of human limitation. He left behind a legacy that continues to haunt every person who thinks that muscle can replace mastery. The dragon didn't fight to prove he was better. He fought to show us that we are all capable of reaching a state of legendary efficiency if we are willing to endure the thousands of repetitions required to master ourselves. This is the truth behind the 350-pound giant and the 135-pound Mastar truth that reminds us that in the world of real combat, the only thing that matters is the shortest distance between 2 points, and Bruce Lee was the only man who truly knew how to travel that distance in the blink of an eye. By the time the sun began to set over the Paramount lot on that Tuesday in 1972, the world had fundamentally changed for the few people who were standing in the shadows of Soundstage 12. They had walked in believing in the power of the giant, and they walked out knowing the truth of the dragon. Marcus Dutton's jaw eventually healed, but his perception of reality never did. He was the man who had faced the lightning and survived, but the lightning had changed the very chemistry of his soul. As for Bruce Lee, he simply picked up his bag, nodded to Clint Eastwood, and walked toward his next meeting, seemingly unaware that he had just performed a miracle of physics. He didn't need the applause, and he didn't need the footage. He knew the numbers, he knew the science, and most importantly, he knew that the myth was actually an understatement. The story of the Green Beret and the Master is more than just a fight. It is a testament to the fact that when human potential is pushed to its absolute limit, the result is something that looks very much like magic, even when it is built on the cold, hard foundation of the most brutal discipline imaginable. Years later, when historians and fans look back at the life of Bruce Lee, they often get caught up in the movies and the fame, but the real story of the dragon is found in these unrecorded moments. It's found in the silence of an empty soundstage and the look of pure, unadulterated shock on the face of a man like Clint Eastwood. It's the realization that we are all operating at a fraction of our true capability. Bruce Lee was the ultimate numbers game, a man who proved that 135 pounds of pure, focused intent will always overcome 350 pounds of unfocused mass. Whether he was catching a bullet with chopsticks or neutralizing a Green Beret in 8 seconds, the message was always the same. Do not be limited by the shape of your body or the expectations of the world. Master the mechanics, master the mind, and you will become the master of your own destiny. The incident at Paramount Lot remains the most powerful evidence of this truth, a hidden legacy that reminds us that the greatest fights are won not with the hands, but with the realization that limits are just an illusion we choose to believe in. Bruce Lee chose to believe in nothing but the truth of the strike, and that is why, 50 years later, we are still trying to understand the man who was too fast for film and too real for reality.